All right. So it looks good, but is it really good? Let's double check again. Let's take this red compare one. Let's make it grayscale again. Go a little thicker right there. Alright, I hit save, and I am fairly happy with that. Actually, I'm very happy with that. Didn't take extremely long period of time. I like the composition. I like the layout. I like the way everything looks. Now, I have to take it to the next level, which, by the way, again, just turn that off, and, I mean, you would be able to tell first. Yeah, that's pretty damn good. Alright, so now there are several other items I have to do before I can continue. The first, so right now this is not an 8x10 document. This is, so let's make it an 8x10 document. Image, canvas size, inches, 8x10. So now it's an 8x10 document. And for giggle's sake, I am going to fill in the background with white, make my white background white, so I get a sense of what I'm looking at. All right, it's pretty good, pretty good. Now, I'm going to duplicate this layer, and we're going to get back to it in a minute. We're not there just yet. All right, so two things I need to do right now. Number one is, I need to, actually three things I need to do right now. Number one is I need to sign the image. Now, I already have a document that I've worked on, and it's easier if I were to just grab my Queen of Hearts, because it's got all my pieces parts in it. So I'm going to open up my Queen of Hearts and apply certain things that I did that to here. The first one is I got my little JB, right? There's my little JB, that's my signature. And I know it's the right size for this resolution. And there's my JB. Let's come over here and decide where is it going to go. So where am I going to put my little JB? I want to put it somewhere out of the way, but I don't want it to be too out of the way. I want it to be noticeable, but not too noticeable. I'm probably going to put it like right over here in this space right here. Now the reason I'm going to put it right there is as follows. It might not hold up. Every so often, when I go to print, it'll show up as a printing error, in which case it'll just show up as a blob, and I'm okay with that blob right there. So if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But I want to make sure that I give it a fighting chance. So there's my little JB, and it's already black and white. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to throw it into my layer. There it is. Now it's part of my image. I'm going to double check my stroke one more time. No stray dots. I didn't think there'd be any stray dots. That's good. All right, so this is my document. Now the next thing I'm going to do, since I'm going to be laser cutting it, is I'm going to make I'm going to duplicate the layer. I'm going to put it up here, and I'm going to make I'm going to invert it so it's white, and then invert this so that it's black. Because when we go to laser cut, we don't want to laser cut the ink, we want to laser cut everything but the ink, and that's really important here. Also, because this is in English, edit, oops, wrong layer, edit, transform, flip horizontal. We want it to be facing this way so that when we ink it up, it reverses and it goes this way. Now the dangerous part about what we're about to do here is that when I go to laser cut, I'm going to be cutting away whatever's black and leave these very thin thready lines. And that easily could break off. And so if you ever see a rubber stamp, it's always kind of got these like grooves, because most of the time people are actually carving. But we're not going to be carving, we're going to go straight down and straight out, and that's going to make a mess. So one of the things that I do is I come over to my Queen of Hearts, and I've got an effect that I'm using called an outer glow. And I'm going to copy the layer style because it's got all sorts of settings that I'll show you in a second. Let me clear this layer style, and let me paste this layer style, and you can see what it does. And what this layer style does, and this happens to be the perfect setting. What the layer style does is it's an outer glow. And the outer glow, if I come over here, it's normal, set to 100%, noise 0. It's white, the spread is 0, and it's using precise at 34 pixels. Versus, by the way, softer, which looks like that. I want precise at 34 pixels, and the range is 100%, which means that literally in these 34 pixels, it's going to go from black to white. Now, because it's not going to reach the surface, because all of this grayscale is not going to be all the way to the surface, none of it will actually get inked. What it'll do is it'll make grooves, and it'll reinforce those pieces that are there. And so I always make sure to do this. So it's an outer glow, normal, 100% opacity, no noise, white, precise, 0 spread, 34 pixels with a 100% range. It works every time. Now, I'm very happy with this. I would be happier with a little bit of a leeway, a little bit of overbite. When I go to cut it, I want to make sure that now we're going to run into two issues here. The first issue we're going to run into is when I go to ink it. When I go to ink it, because there's so much negative space, I'm guarantee I'm going to get ink on the plate. And I want to make sure I avoid that. Now, I could avoid that in one of two ways. One way is I could give myself a nice thick border around this, and then I could try to actually use that as a framing agent. The problem is I'm using a fairly thin MDF, and it'll warp a little bit, and no matter what I do, it's going to get ink on it. So that's one method. The other method is I'm going to cut a mask, which is exactly what I'm going to do. But when I go to burn this, I want to make sure that I cut it out. So I'm actually going to come over here, and I'm actually going to make my canvas a little bit bigger. So I'm going to go canvas size, and instead of 8 by 10, I'm going to go 8.5 by 10.5. And what that's going to do, it's going to make everything bigger, and it's going to, and if I fill in the background layer with black, then I'm going to have an 8.5 by 10.5 composition. I will cut out from it an 8 by 10, and that'll make my life all sorts of easier later on. All right, so far so good. And don't worry, that isn't really there. That little sliver of black is just an illusion. So what do? I save it, and this time I do a save as soon as the save is done. File, save as, and I'm going to save this as a PNG file, and I'm going to call it Hatta laser engrave. And that's what this is. This is the laser engrave file for the Hatta with my signature and the ramps, and it's all good to go. Now I'm going to close this file. No, I'm not going to close this file. I think I can do what I need to do next from this file. So the next thing I need to do is I need to make my mask. And the best way to make my mask is I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to pick a color, any color. I'm going to pick something bright, since we haven't played with any colors recently, just to make my life a little bit easier. I'm going to grab my selection tool, and I'm going to try to select contiguously the empty space. Now when I do that, it's going to only grab around the header, right? There it is. And if I go to this layer, I can then fill, and voila, I now have a perfect outline of the header. Now that being said, this, let me turn off all the other layers, this would be terrible to laser cut out. The reason it'd be terrible is it's a too tight of a fit, and I don't want a really tight fit. I actually want a fit that's going to be a little bit looser. I want to give myself some room to breathe when I put down the mask. So I'm going to do a little trick here. There's multiple ways of doing this, but this one's really fun. I'm going to go to stroke, and I'm going to stroke the inside of my shape. And I'm going to, am I on the right layer? Good. And I'm going to stroke it, let's say 80. So what that just did was it created a stroke of 80 pixels around. Yeah, that'll work. I don't need to go bigger than that. Stroke 80 pixels around. Now I want to get rid of that line, so I'm going to rasterize my layer style, which of course turns the red line into an actual red line. And then to make my life easier, I will grab a nice big old brush tool and just go around the edge of the screen and get rid of this line, because this line I can get rid of that. Yay! Go by that line. I don't need that. Now, over here, this red line, I'm going to select it, and I'm going to delete it. And if all goes well, it's done that. Now let me turn off this other layer here, and what you're going to realize is I don't need this object over here anymore, do I? No, I do not. And that's because my mask is about the big picture. It's not about the little stuff internally. So this stuff over here, I don't care if it gets masked, because the likelihood is that it's not going to get inked up because it's so close to the other areas. So I'm going to take care of this like that. I'm going to double check by going back over here, making sure I get everything. Do another stroke. This time I'll do an outer stroke. And of course, by doing the outer stroke, what did I find? I missed a spot, but that's okay. I'm fine with missing a spot. All right, so now I have my mask file. Now my mask file is almost right. I say almost right because technically it's 8.5 by 10.5, and my final image is going to be 8 by 10. And you're like, well, why do I care if I want it to be bigger? Because if I make it the exact same size, I can also use it to align the paper when the time comes. All right, so I'm going to come over here, File, Save As, and this is not Hatta. This is Hatta. This is a Hatta mask, and I'll save that as a large file. All right, so now I have my laser engraving of my Hatta mask. Now I'm not done yet. Not done yet. Now I still got work to do. I've got to go to Illustrator. Illustrator. All right. All All right. I'm going to make a new file. File. New file. Whenever in Illustrator, always make a new file. Never open up another file that is not an Illustrator file. Always make a new file. There it is. All right, now I'm going to need 3 items to continue. I'm going to need it in 3 different colors, but we'll get to that. The first item is going to be 8.5 by 10.5, and it's going to have no fill. And this item, oops, no fill. And this item is the same size as my print. I'm actually not going to use this except to align everything. And so I'm going to make this one magenta. There you go. Now I need another rectangle. And this rectangle, I need to be 8 by 10. And this rectangle, which is not going to be magenta, because it is going to get cut, it's going to be red. No, it's going to be blue. All right? Now I can take those 2 shapes, and I can center them. And so now I will have both of these shapes. Now, because they're different colors, the laser cutter will treat them separately. They'll allow me to move them together, but then treat them separately. So what's going to happen is I'm going to use the red one to see where things are, but I'm only going to cut the blue one. Same thing, by the way, goes when I finally cut my mask. Now, the last thing I want to do is File, Place, and if I go to my Alice folder, which should be right over here, and if I sort, I should be able to sort by date. Here we go. It should be right there. Excuse me. Look at all my Alice files. Oh, there it is. There's my Hatta mask. When I sort it by date, it's going to ask me to place it. I can actually place it right at the anchor point. It'll fill it perfectly. At which point I'm going to do an image trace. It would normally warn you it's going to take forever, but I have my warnings turned off. I'm then going to expand it. Did it work? Oh, it didn't work. Let's do it again, but this time I'll do an image trace, 3 colors. See if that works now. I didn't like the colors. Good. Expand that. Now, 2 things I want to do here. The first thing I want to do is make sure I set the stroke to be a color like purple and the fill to be empty. Good. Now let's turn off these other 2 lines for a moment and see what we really have. We have to be careful here because there's a lot of stuff going on that we need to make sure about. We have a path and we have a compound path. Now the compound path has the outer box in it, which is great from an alignment perspective, but we don't need it, right? We only need the inner path, which of course we already have. So I'm going to take the compound path and I'm going to delete it. So now I have, and I can take this group and I can ungroup it. I can take this group and I can ungroup it. And so now on my layer, I have 3 different items. I have the path, the 8.5 by 8 by 10 laser cut, and the 8.5 by 11 laser cut. So all 3 of these are here. Now I'm going to save this as an Adobe Illustrator file because I am, and I'm going to call this my Hatta mask, and that's going to be an Adobe Illustrator file, which is fine. The last step to this is I'm going to do a save as a copy. For some strange reason, the Glowforge loves save a copy better than anything else here. And that's going to be Hatta mask copy. And if I do that, I now have an SVG file. So I've really created 2 files that I need. And I'm going to go to the Glowforge software in a second and demonstrate. All right. Create. Upload from file. Let's go to my Alice projects. We have 2 files we want. The first one would be the Hatta mask copy SVG. I'll load that first because it's the fastest. All right, and there it is. It loaded just fine, though we're going to have a problem with it in a second. So I'm going to leave it there for a second. So I've got 1, 2, 3. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to import my PNG file, which of course is my laser engraving. Now the laser engraving is going to take a lot more time to load, and you can laser engrave on a smaller area of the bed than you can cut. So I've got to make sure that I've set up for both. And then I've not loaded anything in the laser cutter yet. I'll do that in the morning when I actually laser cut all this. So I'm going to laser cut the wood with the engrave, and then I'll laser cut the mask out of a really thin piece of poster board, which works great, by the way. It'll take less than a minute when this is done. The other one will probably take about 2.5 hours. So there you go. Depends on how deep I want to carve it. And since I'm using very thin wood, it's an interesting technique. It's a mix. I do too thin, it'll screw up. If I do too thick, it'll screw up. All right, so it loaded. Let's double check the size. See, and if you look at the size, for some reason the size is coming in wrong. It's supposed to be, what was it supposed to be? 8.5, 8.5 by 10.5. And if I do that, it actually works. I just don't know why it loads in improperly, but the fact that I can always get the scale back is happy-go-lucky for me. All right, so I come over here with that. And you can see all three of these move at the same time, which makes my life a lot easier. Matter of fact, if I come over here, if I look at this one, I can say the position is 1.5 by 0.5. Oops. By 0.25. There we go. So I can come over here and do the same thing and say 1.5 by 0.25. And that's what's nice about this, is that you can see it's perfectly lined up. The SVG, if you do what I just did, will always come out properly. Now that I have all three of these, I can come over here and look at each of the settings. So we can look at the different settings that we have. So we've got the three different things. So this one, I'm going to call this one white cardboard. Brilliant. I'm going to call this one white cardboard. And I'm going to call this one ignore. So if you look over here, we have this one, and ignore. And you can know it's the right one because if I were to say ignore on this one, it would change to blue or gray. So instead I say cut as white cardboard, and that's good. And the other one, of course, is gray because I've ignored it. It was there for just alignment purposes. Under this one, I will say that I want to do what's called a 3D stamp. Now the 3D stamp I've got wrong in this case because I had done it at 1200, I've done it at 900, and I'm probably going to do this one at 800. That's fairly slow. 800 speed, full power, very power. 340 LPI, you're like, 340? Why did you set it to 900? I needed the data. By the way, I've done this at higher res, and it just doesn't make a big difference here. 340 is going to do what we need it to do. So now, if I do all of this at once, I'm an idiot, just so you know. What I'm going to do instead is I am going to turn off this. I'm going to hit ignore on this, put the cardboard in, cut it. Then I will not ignore this, and then cut it. And that means that both of them will end up getting cut at 8.5 by 8 by 10. So we're overburning basically to give myself a little bit of room. And it'll take a few hours, and then I'll have both images. And so I will do that. And then after I'm done with that, I will show you the final board, the final engrave. I'll then wash it, clean it, ink it, and print it. And then we'll be done. So thanks for watching. This has been going pretty well. It only was about a few hours to really get this image where I needed it to be. And I'm actually really happy with the way this looks on the bed. So I can't wait to see what these prints are. Last thing I got to figure out is what color. Probably just going to do it black, but I also have red and blue. Ooh. All right. Till next time.
And as always, please be sure to like, subscribe, and follow. Ooh, and share. Like, subscribe, follow, and share. Ooh, and comment. Like, subscribe, share, follow, and comment. Yeah, that's right. Do it all. Thank you.